Hey guys, Dan back again with another video, and today I have my blind reaction to the first episode of Firefly. Right off the bat, I want to state something that's really important. I accidentally watched the second episode. I thought it was the first episode, but it turns out it wasn't. So yeah, in the next video, I'm gonna be talking about how, I'm new to this series and everything. Just ignore that, this is the proper first episode. But I will obviously release them in proper order. This one will be first, and then the next one will be second. I apologize, I know the proper order now, everything's good. I did my research, which I should probably do, anyways. I should just do it anyways, but I don't know, I just try to not, I try to stay away from it, due to spoilers and things like that, but we're good. Everything's good. So yeah, obviously I've seen the first episode, or the second episode. This is a 2 hour, an hour and a half special. It's a two-parter. That's what it is. It's a two-parter, double length pilot. This is the pilot, obviously. I'm gonna close that. Yeah, this is pretty much a movie, to be honest. An hour and a half, and yeah, it's gonna be super exciting. Obviously, it's kind of awkward. You guys have no idea, what my, how I thought of the show, but so far I've enjoyed it. Watching that one episode, it's been great. I've been impressed so far. I'm already super into it. All the characters. I'm loving all of them, and I hope this this episode kind of properly introduces all of them. I'm hoping for some Simon and his sister. I don't think they mentioned her name. I haven't rewatched the second episode, and I also haven't taken notes either. I haven't I haven't taken notes at all. I kind of want to just do this episode, and then I can take notes overall. I just wanted to wait until I did this one. So yeah, let's just get into this. I kind of talked about my predictions in the next video, so it's weird. It's my fault. It's my bad, but nothing I can do about it. Apparently, they aired that episode instead of this one because they wanted a more action-packed beginning to the show. So it is what it is. At the time of recording this, I don't know if I can put these on YouTube yet. I've tried to see, but it's kind of just been, I don't know, they're taking a really long time. I think it's Fox, right? Yeah, I'm pretty sure it's Fox for this. Just taking a really long time. I might just give up and just normally post it, but we'll see. Let's get into this. Like I said, I'm hoping for some Simon, mainly Simon. I'll mention it in the next video, but so far he's my favorite character. Him and his sister are the most intriguing part of the show for me so far. But honestly, everything about the show is super intriguing. So yeah, I'm already loving it, and yeah, I'm ready for this. So let's jump into the actual first episode. This is called Serenity. I have no idea what that can mean. The first one, I had the title, but I didn't look at it, and I kind of just thought I didn't have them. It was the train job, so yeah, that makes sense. Serenity, I honestly have no idea. That gives me nothing. Yeah, we'll see. 3, 2, 1, and play. Starting off hot. Okay, so I'm assuming this is where, they talked about it in the beginning of the next episode. It's so weird, you know. I don't know. It's so weird talking about it like that, but. Now, yep. He's pretty much a leader, you know, from the beginning. Seems like. Damn right, you hold. Huh. There you go. Nice shot. There we go. Hey. Yeah, better run. Jesus. Miles something. I do like his charisma so far. Come on, hang in there, Bendis. That's the attitude. Come on, Bendis. Whoa. Years. nice. Pretty good name, this land. You're good. This guy. Yeah, dear God in heaven. Oh wow, what a that was a nice segue. Huh? Mm-hmm. There she is. Yep. I was gonna say, yep, this is obviously gonna be the government. Yeah, kinda just wanted to see everything, but not really interested. Firefly. There you go. For now. Maybe the opening. This is a pretty cool opening for sure. Uh-huh. Hmm. Hmm. Uh-huh. Yep. Mm-hmm. Yep. Mm. Good point. Mm. Mm. Sounds pretty nice. Mm. Hmm. He does. Oh my god, he's doing it again. He always does that. He just boards us in. Mm. 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 Serenity. Got a drop. Hmm. There we go. I'm assuming this is how she ends up joining them. I'm assuming Persephone. Hmm. Hmm. We do. So this is where we meet him, huh? Hmm. 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 Oh, shouldn't have said that. Hmm. Uh-huh. Hmm. It's true. Malcolm Reynolds. That's his name. Hmm. Uh-huh. Uh, hmm. 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 Well, yeah, we will. Hmm. Hmm. Serenity. Yeah. Yep. Yep. Yeah, I think. Mm. 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 Uh-huh. Yes. I was wondering when you would show up. Nice to meet you, Simon. Uh-huh. Mm. 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 Should sue them. Yeah. There you go. Nice job, Kaylee. Simon. She did. Yes, she is. She does. Mm. Wow. Ho ho ho. She does, in fairness. Not anymore. She did. Or you did. Hmm. 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 Uh-huh. Hmm. Yep. Oh, sorry. Hmm. It is. Mm. Oh. I would love to. It was. Oh, really? Yep, a lot of tension between him and most people. Yes. Oh. Mm. Mm. Yep, I was. Ho ho ho. I was thinking they were suspicious of him. I know he seems suspicious, but it's not him. Dev. I knew they were gonna be suspicious of him as well. Yep, he's the only one that it could have been. Ho ho ho. Oh, here we go. And poor Kaylee. Oof. Come on, Jane. I know you want to, but Mm. Alright. Pretty much had no choice. Obviously, you know, he's gonna be able to save her. I bet he will. James worried. I think I know what this is gonna be. Yep. Oh wow. It's all over. You'll find out soon. Not explaining it. Here we are. Yep. Uh-huh. Hmm. Hmm. Say every right to me. Hmm. Mm-hmm. Hmm. Uh-huh. Hmm. Yep. Hmm. Brainwashing her, yep. Hmm. Hmm. I don't think she will, but that's all that matters. Yep. Hmm. Hmm. Alright. Hmm. 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 Hey, yeah. Ooh, should not have said that. Yep. Me too. There we go. I'm gonna outro. Yep. Oh, we're giving the job to Jane, huh? Resist, man. I know it's difficult. I bet they will. Yeah. I mean, is there really a point of... Oh, I bet she is. Ooh. He's the type to actually think about it, so he might do it. Good Lord. There we go. A lot of trouble. How are you gonna get out of this one again? Yeah. Jesus. Alright. Stay calm. Whew. We can breathe finally. Okay then. That's good. Uh-huh. That's what it does. Unfortunately. You are. But deep down you're nice. Help. Yes. Thank you. Good point. Good way to put it. Be honest. Well, I really don't. I don't know. Yeah, he is. Wow, great. It's funny how certain people find it funny, certain people don't. You really are. I feel like that one was too far, in my opinion. No patience. Mm. Yeah. Shots, yeah. Mm. Mm. Alright. Mm. Yep. Great concept, Jim. Not great. Mm. Wow. Wow. Mm. No, Jane. Mm. 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 But we always pull through. Sorry about that. So he actually did. Seems like he went through with it. We'll see what happens there. There she is. Nice to see you again. That's fair. Ho ho ho. Nice job, Jane. Oh wow. Ooh. So he definitely went through it then. Whoa. Dude, Simon needs you. I know Simon's gonna pull through. I believe in him. Dude, this is so... The tension is... Ooh. Whoa. What's that? Yep. Both situations not really... I mean... This one's not going too bad, but, you know. I guess it could have gone worse. Good thing Jane, changed his mind. Come on, Simon, come on. Oof, there you go, man. And she's so much trauma. Nice shot. Even when she's down. Ooh. Well, you got your payback. Ooh. He got his payback. Come on, Simon, come on. Ooh. Yep. On their way. But they're going to use her. And took his eyes off him for 1 second. Holy shit, Mel. Damn. Oof. Dude. The directness of how direct Mal is insane. Calm down. being followed. And then they're shaving. Getting closer and closer. Ooh. Ooh, pull a U-turn on him. Nice one. Ooh. That's why he's the one. He's the guy. Jane. Ladies and gentlemen, we made it. Jane. Oh. He deserves it, honestly, he does. That's just the way it is. I'm assuming we're gonna get one more scene with these two, and then that's it. We will. Samuel will put there. He's always, both there. At least you got a little bit of information. A little bit, dude. Now is. Dude, he knows everything. He really is a psycho. What the hell? They will. Wow, what an interesting interaction. Now we're gonna get another one. This is where it happened. He doesn't believe it. He doesn't. He doesn't know what to say. I can tell. It's gonna do it, I think. Yeah. Great stuff. Whew. I can't believe we've been here for almost an hour and a half. That's insane. There's the fox. Wow, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, that was pretty much a whole movie. Whew. I'm literally sweating buckets. That was amazing. I'm so glad that we got an episode of this length. It gave a lot of, now, I do regret, not, checking this one out. And just in general, it was a little weird, to just pretty much know most of the, future events, for example, the whole river, thing, even, when, Mal opened the the container, I guess, yeah, the container, I like I said, I pretty much knew who it was, so, I think that would have been a interesting reveal, my reaction would have been, pretty interesting, but, I mean, like I said, there's nothing I can do, it is what it is, from here on out, we'll have everything in order, and, yeah, in terms of the actual episode, Mel was such an interesting character, everything about him, is super, I don't know, it's, I guess you could say it's, nuanced, very, blunt, and, very stern captain, but, I mean, that's just how he is, that's how he's always been, and, he's never changed, I think it was Simon, yeah, it was, he said how, he's a psycho, and he is, he really is a psycho, but, you can't, knock him, in terms of, how good of a captain he is, what I mean, he succeeds, pretty much every time, he finds a way to make it through, and, that's something that you can't, fault him for, that's something you have to admit, even if you don't like him, or, you have a complicated relationship with him, which, I'm not gonna lie, is pretty much every character in this series, has a very, interesting relationship with them, but, that's definitely one thing that, none of them can say anything about, he always gets it done, and, yeah, once again, I said this in the, I said this in the next video, but, I feel like I, didn't say that much, during the reaction, I didn't say that much, but, like I said, I feel like this is a series where, after the episode, I'm gonna, because during the episode, I have a lot to say, but I kind of want to, wait till it's over, and then, get all my thoughts out, but, at the same time, maybe, I'll tend to forget a few things, but, it seems to be working out, for the most part. The whole, Simon and, River, relationship is so far already super touching, and, I'm glad that, Mal decided to, allow him to be the medic, because, it just, emphasizes, how much he trusts him and how much he believes in him, and, I think that's going to help Simon out a lot, because, he was pretty paranoid pretty much the entire time, but, I think that's gonna, give him a lot of, certainty, and, just, it's gonna help him out a lot overall, and, I think Mal understands, it's actually really similar in a lot of ways, you could argue, the parallels, they're there, because, Simon did what he had to do, he didn't exactly, do the most nice thing, but he did what he had to do to, save someone that he loved, and, you could argue Mal's the same way, what I mean, he doesn't exactly he doesn't do it in the most, how do I say, in the most ideal way, or the most, generous way, but, he does what he has to do, and, you have to respect that, and I think, that's exactly why Mel was able to see that, and proposed that, offer to Simon, and, he obviously accepted. And, obviously, in the next episode I saw that, he's doing a great job so far, so yeah, we'll see what happens with that. I was thinking, during the episode to check some of the names, because I forgot some of the names already, and I'm just really bad with names in general. But I'm just gonna say Shepard for now. That's how I'm gonna refer to him. I think we got his name one time, but then everyone kept referring to him as Shepard, I'm pretty sure, but that's what I'm gonna refer to him as so far. His character is really interesting because in the final scene with him, you got to understand his perspective, being here, and he kind of feels guilty, you know what I mean. He feels like he doesn't belong, and he feels like he's not doing the right thing, but it's understandable, and it's a weird situation, it's difficult, for him. It's really difficult because, like I said, a lot of the time he feels like, he's helping us, for the wrong reasons, and, with the guy that, he was supposed to protect and everything, he wasn't even able to do that, so he's obviously gonna feel at fault for that as well, so, that's gonna be, lingering in his mind. And, Kaylee's another great character. She's one of my favorites for sure. She's one of the sweetest characters for sure, really welcoming, to pretty much everyone. And, just in general, I think it's difficult, it's difficult, especially in this type of series, to have a favorite character, like I said, so far it probably is Simon, but, I don't think Kaylee's that far off, I think she's great as well. And, her whole situation, obviously it was super difficult to go through what she went through, she pulled through, and also, she managed to help everyone, and, hopefully she, gets better, and, everything's great with her, which, I mean, it's gonna happen because, like I said, I've seen the next episode, so, she's back to being Kaylee, being one of the most helpful, characters. Where do I start with Jane? So much to say about him, he's I want to, give a shout out to the actor. I think he's doing a great job, in general, to portray the character in the way that he's doing it. And, it was interesting, that last scene is maybe my favorite scene so far of the series, not the Simon one was great as well, but I'm talking about the Jane one, Mal knew all along, and, that was just insane, man. He's probably the most intelligent one, Kaylee's super intelligent. Obviously Simon is, he's a rare he's a rare specimen. He's special. Not as special as his sister, but he's super special. But I'll get to Mel in a second. I briefly touched on him, in the beginning, but he's pretty much the main character, so he should have a lot of dedicated thoughts to him. But Jane is super interesting. Obviously he decided to not go through with the betrayal, but he considered it. He did, and I think I said it during the episode, but he would be one of the few people who would, consider doing something like that, in my opinion. And, for a second I did think he was going to go through with it, but obviously, I mean, he was never going to, he was never going to shoot Mal. I mean, something like that to happen this early on in the series, I mean, it was never going to happen. But, it's interesting because, even Mal's, conscious of the fact that one day it might happen, he might actually go through with it. And, Jane's response is so great, that'll be an interesting day, because he asked him, what if one day you do decide to, go through with it? And, I'm interested to see if that's gonna happen. I'm assuming it probably is. I'm pretty sure there's 13 episodes, I'm pretty sure. So, it's definitely possible, definitely possible for that to happen. I'm not sure if he's gonna kill him, I'm not sure about, if it'll go that far, but, he's definitely, there's definitely signs of, him having the desire to do something like that, for the benefit of himself, you know what I mean? That offer, seemed pretty promising to him, because he would, have his own ship, and, it sounds like, he wants to have something like that, which, makes sense, a character like him, it would definitely make sense to, for him to, constantly, want things for himself. And yeah, I think that's all I have for him so far. River's really interesting, I touched on it, I'll touch on it in the next video, but, clearly she's, super valuable, and, she's special, she's one of a kind. And, that's exactly why, they were brainwashing her, trying to, once again, I obviously don't exactly know, why they were, doing all that, and what it would lead to, but, obviously, it affected her a lot, a lot of, just trauma, and just in general, she's probably never going to be able to recover from it, which, it's understandable, in the, little bit of visions, we get at the beginning of the next episode, we could see a little bit, of what they were doing to her, and, it makes sense, it makes sense. What's her name, Zoe as well, she's a great character, I feel like, with her, we haven't, I could be wrong, but I feel like we haven't, seen her shine yet. I feel like it's gonna pay off a little bit later on, but, I still think she's a great character for sure, and, I think her dynamic with, Mel, and, with, oh my god, I forgot, the pilot's name as well. He's super badass. He obviously is the reason why, we're even alive. That was super just incredible, move that he managed to pull off. And yeah, he's another, great character, really, I feel like he's also, super just honest, you know what I mean? He's a super honest character, and, he does want the best for everyone, but, at the same time, he's a little bit similar to Mal, in the sense that, he, like I said, he's honest, and, he won't, he won't be scared or anything to, just say it how it is. And, back to Zoe, I think her character's interesting, I don't know, I for some reason, I'm struggling a little bit to talk about a character. I feel like, I don't know, I feel like we haven't, seen a character thrive yet, but you know, I feel like as the show goes on, I'll have more thoughts on her. But yeah, I don't know. For some reason, you know, she's one of the lesser interesting characters, but I don't really know why. That's just how it is. I think that covers everyone. You know, obviously I briefly touched on the pilot. You know, I'll get his name. You know, after this video, you know, I will jot down everyone's names. You know, I'll take notes and everything. And hopefully, you know, this video can, you know, go up pretty soon. You know, like I said, you know, it's I'm just having a little bit of trouble, you know, seeing if I can put this on YouTube or not. But you know, we'll see what happens with that. But yeah, I think that's all I have to say. This is an hour and 47, so yeah, one of my longest videos. I think probably my second longest video to date. In terms of, you know, the actual episode, I mean, I highly doubt I'll watch it. It was a movie. I mean, it literally was a movie. I highly doubt I will watch an episode that long for a long time. You know, this show is already pretty long, you know, in terms of episodes as it is, and you know, having a double length was, yeah, it was essentially a movie. But yeah, that's all I have to say. You know, I hope you guys enjoyed the reaction. I appreciate your time. You know, this was a pretty long one, and yeah, I hope to see you in the next one. Peace.